What is up, Fight Night Picks family? We are back with another episode of Makai's Money Making Plays. You already know how the video goes. We're going to start with the lock of the week, moving on to the most confident picks on the card, favorite underdogs, and then we're going to wrap the video up with the parlays. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and let's get the video underway. Now, recapping UFC Paris, it was a very ugly slate. Mauricio Rufy let me and just about all of America down with that disappointing performance. I don't understand how that happened. He came out and spoke about it, said that it wasn't, him in the ring. Hey man, a lot of you agreed with me that the Mauricio Rufy by knockout was a perfect call, but I guess not. BSD had other things in mind, and he gets the submission in the second round, which was crazy. I'm still a little burnt out over that, but it is what it is, man. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. I will admit I am feeling a little defeated, but it didn't, deter me from doing some more research for UFC Noche. Even though I'm not a big fan of this card, you saw how I, compared it to last year's UFC Noche card. Night and day difference. I believe Dana is more, invested in boxing right now, which I understand. Canelo versus Crawford is one of the biggest fights in the past 10, 15, 20 years. So I do expect a little bit more from Dana on at least, the bigger cards. UFC Paris was a very good card, but you got UFC Noche right after. You still got to deliver, But it is what it is. There is a couple of guys that I like on this card, a couple of guys and gals, I should say. But for the lock of the week, I think I'm going to go back to something that we've had a little bit of success in, and I'm going to tap back into it. I do understand a lot of the lines that are available on this card. Some of the fighters sitting at a little bit of a heavier favorite than I would like, but I got something in store that I think you guys are gonna like. So without wasting any more time, let's tap into UFC Noche lock of the week. Louis Garule and Jared Gordon parlay plus 110. I really like it. I think both of these guys have a very significant striking advantage in both of their matchups. We look at Garule taking on Aguilar, who is a very short, stocky build, who primarily likes to use jiu-jitsu to his advantage. But I believe Garule is going to hold the advantage in striking, and I believe he's going to be able to dictate wherever the fight goes because I believe he's the better wrestler. I know he was knocked out last fight against Ode Osbourne, but if you look at the physicals between Ode Osbourne and Jose Aguilar, it's complete night and day difference. Ode Osbourne, super long reach, super fast. Jose Aguilar has the shortest reach in the UFC. So Garule's not going to have to deal with, getting out of the way of those very long shots, which is what he got caught with in his debut fight. Got put to sleep by Ode Osbourne. I think he will look really good on the feet against Jose Aguilar. I believe he'll be able to stuff any takedowns that Aguilar tries to throw. And even if he does get taken down, Aguilar has a tendency to choose submission over position, which is something that has costed him a lot. If you look at his most recent fight not his most recent fight, but if you go back to the fight with Mendoka, I believe his name was, he was, spamming the submissions, but also getting himself in worse positions. Landed in the third round, ended up in full mount for a majority of the round. I believe it was about 3 minutes of control time for Mendoka in that fight. And there was other scrambles within that fight where he was fighting for submissions and was ultimately getting controlled by Mendoka. Landed some pretty good shots as well. I feel as though Garule, with the wrestling background, he'll be able to dictate wherever the fight's going to go. His striking is completely better. I believe this is a really good bounce back opportunity for him as well. Now looking at Jared Gordon, Rafa Garcia has been I don't really, classify him as like a prospect. He's a middle of the pack type of guy, but I feel as though Jared Gordon, who is surging right now, just coming off of that knockout over Thiago Moises, I feel as though this is a layup for Jared Gordon. I think he's the better striker from distance and in the pocket. Definitely in the pocket is something that really stuck out to me. Jared Gordon's boxing in the pocket is pretty high level. I know, he didn't really look that good against Paddy Pimblett, but if you go back and look at the fight against Nasrat Haqparast, who's a much better striker than Rafa Garcia, he held his own in that fight. And, a lot of people, including myself, might have edged that fight in his direction. I feel as though Jared Gordon with the wrestling advantage as well, which is similar to, Louis Carule, which is why I paired them up. He'll also be able to dictate where the fight goes with his wrestling background. He was able to take down Thiago Moises, who does have some solid jiu-jitsu and was not in danger at all. Got back to the feet and ended up knocking him out. I don't think a knockout would be, crazy from Gordon versus Rafa Garcia, but I wouldn't, go out and choose that prop as a lock in this matchup. I do think both of these gentlemen could get it done on the scorecards, but both of them have the opportunity to win by knockout. Gordon, like I said, he's continuing to surge, even though he's 34, 35 years old. The four fight win streak. I think Rafa Garcia is a very fundamentally sound, systematic kickboxer who does the same type of combinations over and over and over again. I feel as though Gordon's going to be able to time some of that, move out of the, avoid a lot of the shots, close the distance, which I think is something that Rafa Garcia has a lot of issues with. Guys that are able to close that distance, get through, his low kicks, his jab, his two, and exchange with him in the pocket. We've also seen him struggle with pressure. Vince Pichel in their last fight in that third round, Pichel had him on the back foot a lot, and I believe Jared Gordon will have Rafa Garcia on the back foot for majority of this fight. I think both of them win a pretty clean decision. Wouldn't be surprised, if it's 30-27 or if they end up finding a finish. But the safest way to do it is to money line them both. Get you to about plus 110 on most sports books. I know there's a couple other places where the price might change, but I'm getting at plus 110. You guys should be able to get it at plus 110 if you jump in on it now. And I'm going with the double G parlay for UFC Noche lock of the week. Now, moving on. Most confident picks. I really have, outside of the lock of the week, Garule and Gordon, I really only have two because a lot of these guys could be flippy floppy. Like there's a lot of people that are heavy on Calvin Gastelum. There's a lot of people that are, riding the Zach Reese wave. I'm not buying too high on those guys. So the two that I have for you is Alessandro Costa and Tatiana Suarez. I'll start with Suarez taking on Amanda Lemos. I feel as though, like I said in the breakdown, the grappling advantage that Tatiana Suarez, the wrestling advantage that Suarez holds over Lemos is going to play out significantly in this fight. She's going to be able to take her down. I do see Lemos having a little bit of success on the feet with the striking, but I think Suarez, she's going to be able to shoot herself out of a cannon and get these takedowns. I see Lemos on her back for a majority of the time. I think Suarez will implement, some wrist control, taking that away so she won't be able to get back to her feet. She might even, be able to find a finish as well. Wouldn't be surprised if Suarez gets a ground and pound stoppage, too many shots where she's not, Lemos isn't responding to the referee the correct way that he would, like for her to do, or maybe even lock in a submission. We've seen her, submitted by Verna Jandiroba not too long ago. I don't think Suarez is far from another title shot, especially with a new champion on the horizon. I think if Suarez comes out and dominates like I believe she will, she could be, right back in the mix for another title shot. So I do like Tatiana Suarez to win in this matchup. Now, moving on to Alessandro Costa. I really like this guy. He's a phenomenal striker. I feel as though even though he's coming off of that, 16th month layoff, I'm not convinced that Correa is going to be able to handle the pressure that Alessandro Costa walks forward with. He was supposed to fight Edgar Chavez, which I feel as though would have been a better fight, especially for this card. Edgar Chavez is a much longer, linkier build for the division, where Correa isn't necessarily that at all. Correa does have some good movement. He bounces on the balls of his feet, but I think Costa will be able to, neutralize that with the heavy low kicks that he throws. The win over Kevin Borjas is what's replaying in my mind, where he took his legs away pretty early in that fight. I think he's got knockout power, the pressure that he has, and the losses that he has. You can forgive him for him. It's Steve Erceg and Amir Abazi. We can forgive Alessandro Costa to losing to two of the top 10 flyweights in the world. So I'm in on Alessandro Costa. I think he's going to look really good. And I'll even go out and say that he is live to find a finish. So those are the two that I really, really am sold on for UFC Noche. Now moving on to the favorite underdogs, I got three. I got David Martinez, Dustin Stoltzfus, and a close money favorite, or excuse me, close money underdog, Quang Lee, sitting at minus 102. I'll start with David Martinez. I really like this guy. You know, I told you when he made his debut, he was going to come in, make a splash, and get the knockout, and that's exactly what he did over Simon Oliveira. I think Martinez will be able to dictate where the fight goes with his speed. He bounces in and out of the pocket very well. He's got pretty slick head movement. I know Rob Font is notorious for having a really good jab, but it's not as accurate as it has been in the past. Even in the G Matsumoto fight, I really feel as though the only advantage he had was that fake glove touch, which he was able to, stumble Matsumoto back momentarily. But if you look at the striking in the pocket and even from outside, Gene was getting the best of the exchanges for majority of that fight. Font had, the early success. I gave Matsumoto rounds 2 and 3. So I think Font is on the decline. He's been training with, he trains with Calvin Cater in the New England, I forget the name of the gym, but I believe it's like New England team or something like that. But I feel as though those guys are on a decline. I predicted it with Steve Garcia versus Calvin Cater. I gave you guys Steve Garcia as the lock of the week. And then I think we're going to see it again with David Martinez. The price has definitely dropped down significantly on him. A lot of people are buying in. I think David Martinez is a safe bet as an underdog as well. So give me David Martinez plus 112. I really like him. I really think he's capable of winning against the aging Rob Font. I've doubted Rob Font in his last 3 fights. He's proved me wrong. And 2, one of them was a close little, could have been a robbery. But I think this is the one where we see Rob Font take a loss. Moving on to Dustin Stoltzfus. This is more of a I'm not believing Kelvin Gastelum is still at the top level more than I'm picking Dustin Stoltzfus. I do know Kelvin Gastelum is notorious for his chin, even though in his last fight he did get cracked, he did get dropped. He was turning it on late in that 3rd round against Joe Pyfer, but Joe Pyfer also spoke about how he was unfamiliar, uncomfortable in that 3rd round, coming off the injury, coming off the layoff, which caused him to look very gun shy. I think Dustin Stoltzfus is a guy who is not going to be gun shy. We just saw him put Nursultan Ruziboyev in a couple compromised positions. I honestly thought Dustin Stoltzfus won that fight, and I gave you Ruziboyev and another fighter for that lock of the week, and we ended up losing. It was Ruziboyev inside the distance and Rodolfo Bellato inside the distance. Bellato had to pull out because of his injury, and it's Ruziboyev did not finish Dustin Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus is a tough guy. I don't think he's gonna get chinned by Kelvin Gastelum with his boxing. I don't see him getting wrestled. I think Dustin Stoltzfus is pretty strong and capable in the grappling department. If you're not familiar, he has pretty good jiu-jitsu as well. I think this is, like I said, this is more of I'm out on Gastelum more than I'm in on Stoltzfus. So not a confident underdog pick, but I feel as though, like I mentioned, Gastelum is a candidate for another parlay buster. So I'm going with Dustin Stoltzfus. I think he can begin to change the minds of a lot of people on Kelvin Gastelum. And finally, we go to Quang Lee. This is a close money call. A close money fight. Luna is he is a featherweight, cutting to 135 for the very first time in his career. He's young, he's unproven, does like to pressure, but Quang Lee is a very good kickboxer in himself, can time a lot of takedowns. We saw that, with the Chris Gutierrez fight. We saw that in that fight with Gaston Bolanos where he choked him out. He's very capable on the feet and off of his back on the mat with the wrestling, with the grappling. I think Quang Lee is going to look really good in this fight. Maybe at a speed disadvantage, but I feel as though he'll be able to time or, correct that with the power. I do feel as though he's going to look like the sharper out of the two, seeing that he is the more natural bantamweight. We need to see what Luna looks like on the scale as well. That is another factor into this fight. But I do believe, Quang Lee will be able to mix it up with the kickboxing, with the wrestling, with the jiu-jitsu, and be able to pull off probably a close decision. Maybe, depending on what that weight cut looks like, he could, end up gassing Luna out. He's never fought at this weight again. So we're going to see what Quang Lee has for Luna. I do believe he wins this fight, though. And minus 102, minus 105. I'm seeing on a couple of books. It's not a bad, not a bad investment in my belief. So give me those three gentlemen to possibly win as underdogs. Now, moving on to my favorite section, your favorite section. You already know Makai's money making plays of parlays. I got a couple for you. Again, I'm not a very large fan of UFC Noche. With that being said, I'm keeping the volume a little low. So I got a couple plays for you. We're going to go through them one by one. We're going with Gene Silva and Jared Gordon money line minus 103. I do feel as though that is very safe. That is very high likelihood of hitting, because I do believe Gene Silva wins over Diego Lopez. I don't know if it's inside the distance. I don't know if it's by decision, but I do think Gene Silva is walking away victorious. And I just gave you, Jared Gordon as part of the lock of the week. Next, we got Tatiana, Luis Garule, Gordon, basically the lock of the week with Alexandra Costa and Tatiana Suarez tagged on, plus 202. Then we're going Silva, Quang Lee, and Alexandra Costa, plus 259. Silva, Gordon, and Alexander Hernandez, who I do believe is live to beat Diego Ferreira. I do think the speed is going to cause Ferreira a lot of issues. I can see him maybe getting like a flash knockdown on Ferreira. Maybe he gets a flash finish. Back to back, both of them were supposed to fight on the same card. One got a knockout, one had to pull out because of his opponent's injury. But I do think Hernandez is live to win. Plus 272. Then we're going Martinez versus Font over 2.5, because I do believe Font, I don't think he's necessarily chinny. I don't think Martinez is going to chin him, but I do believe Martinez will put a lot of volume on him. And I think we're going to a decision. I think Martinez wins. I can see him winning 29-28. I think Font will probably win the first round, and we'll see Martinez turn it up rounds 2 and 3. Or maybe Martinez wins the first round. Font has a better showing in round 2, and then Martinez pulls it off in the third. So I can see a situation like that playing out. Quang Lee and then Alexander Hernandez plus 407. Then we're going Alexandra Costa, Alexander Hernandez, Quang Lee over 2.5 in the Rendon versus Piera fight. I'm not sold on Piera. I'm not buying in on her, but I do believe we're going to a decision in that fight. And then we're going David Martinez, Quang Lee, Jared Gordon, Luis Garule, part of the lock of the week, and Gene Silva plus 1156. I think that's really solid right there. I think we're coming home with some money in our pockets. So let me know what you guys think of the lock of the week. Let me know what you think of the most confident picks, the favorite underdogs. If you're in on Dustin Socials, if you're out on Dustin Socials, if you're in on Kelvin Gastelum, let me know what you guys think of the picks. Let me know what you got to say overall. If you don't got nothing to say, drop a W in the comments. And like always, I will see you later this week. Thank you for tuning in.